Head coach Mike Desormeaux talking Ragin Cajuns football. It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. Thrilled and honored to be having our next guest on. He is Ragin Cajuns head football coach Mike Desormeaux going into year two, talking about how we talk about it all the time with players about how the game slows down. How much does it slow down for a new head football coach? We do talk about the quarterback situation and when maybe he will name a starting quarterback for the Ragin Cajuns. And we talk about the defense. Also, the Cajuns have a knack for finding undervalued offensive linemen. One that is a former Ragin Cajun and now formerly with the Florida Gators will be drafted by the NFL this week. And we do get an update on injured wide receiver Michael Jefferson, who is apparently doing much better than before. With no further ado, let's have it. It is Michael Desormeaux, head coach of the Ragin Cajuns football team. Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. Welcoming in once again the head coach of the Louisiana Ragin Cajuns football team, Mike Desormeaux. I probably asked you this question before, Coach. I've asked other Ragin Cajuns head coaches this question, so you kind of have to know that it's coming. Who is the Ragin Cajuns starting quarterback?
Yeah, no, really, it's a fun spot to be. We're in a really good place where you got three guys that you feel really confident can win games. Unfortunately, I was hoping Zion and Chandler were going to be able to go at it all spring, and I thought certainly you'd be able to figure out kind of where it fell there. With Chandler not being able to go, that meant Zion got a lot of reps, and that was certainly a good thing for him. Coming out of it, I feel completely confident that Zion Chris could go out there and be the starting quarterback. Chandler played really well last year, and I just think there's some value in the competition. So this summer, we're going to let him compete. We're going to try to move pretty quickly, as quickly as we can in summer and fall camp to decide it. But, those, and Ben included, Ben is just going to be kind of a wait and see where he's at coming off of that injury and how fast he can get back. But, we've got a good problem right here where you've got three guys that compete really well. So we're going to let them compete. And whoever wins the job will certainly put our team in a really good position to win football games.
All right, so we've talked about this on Lockdown before to update people that they don't know. Ben Woldrich out with a knee injury since November. Chandler Fields had a non-athletic injury that he had to have surgery on. And so that left Zion Chris, like you said, to take all the reps. How did you, measure and not measure is the right word, but how did you control his shoulder where he's not icing it down every after every practice? Because he's getting all the reps. Usually you split those up, and he's taking every single one of them. I think he said after the spring game that he was throwing like 100 passes during practice.
Yeah, so he took all the ones and twos reps. The threes reps, we worked Lance there a little bit. We have some plans to use him in a Wildcat format, for the season. So that allowed him to get some quarterback reps, which was good. I think the biggest thing was, arm care and management. Zion is young and he's really physically very strong and mature. So we kind of constantly kept an eye on how many he was throwing. We managed the Indy, where typically quarterbacks go in individual and they throw more balls than they throw in practice. So we cut down the throwing in Indy where his reps were really more in the team settings. And in Indy worked on footwork and eye progression, things like that. So, we really were in constant communication with him and, hey, how are you feeling, and all those things. But he held up really well, did a good job, and kind of what we talked to him about was, look, no throwing on the off days, really rest, don't want you doing any of that, which
we're doing Locked On Sunbelt with head coach of the Louisiana Ragin Cajuns, Mike Desormeaux. All right, so tell us the improvement, or how are you handling Zion Chris? Because he didn't play a whole lot last year, and then he got to play in the bowl game and played pretty well. So how do you got Chandler Fields with all his experience, and then say you were competing? How do you set that up where Chandler knows what he knows, but Zion isn't quite have that experience yet?
Well, I think the good thing about it is when you have a quarterback that is experienced and is veteran, you don't have to dial back the offense, so that a young guy can catch up, and you throw everything against the wall and you see what he can figure out, because you certainly feel like we've got a really good team coming back. We have a lot of guys that gained really significant experience that's going to be important for us this year in a lot of different positions. And, you don't want to limit what you can do offensively or as a team because of, one player when you have other options. So, that's the approach we took with Zion was, no, like, let's install it. Let's throw it all out there and let's see what he can handle. And, the playbook part of it, he knows really well. He's a really smart kid and he understands it. He's done a great job with the concepts in the pass game and understanding the reads and progressions. I think the thing that always takes a little bit longer that a lot of people don't realize is the pass protections. Our quarterback certainly has a lot of say in how we protect it and who we're working to and how we're going to slide the protection, all those things. And that's where I think for a young quarterback, that's where you kind of start to see the difference in the older guys and the younger guys. And, for Zion, that's something that he really needs to work on in the offseason is really mastering those protections. And it's not even really not knowing them or understanding them, but being comfortable with clearly communicating exactly what he wants done. So at the end of the day, that's the most important thing is that he understands where the issues are. And that's where those older guys, they know that because they've been in that meeting room for 3, 4, 5 years. And they know, well, they are the final authority in protections. So I think for Zion, it's just getting comfortable and saying, no, this is how I want to get it fixed. This is where I want the protection going and making sure everybody's on the same page. But he's made big strides there. But that's going to be the big thing for him this summer going into fall camp is making sure he masters those protections.
All right, let's take a time out. We'll come back with more of our conversation with head coach Mike Desormeaux of the Louisiana Ragin Cajuns and how much it did slow down for him or have slowed down for him in year number 2. But first, let's talk a little FanDuel. Grand slams, no hitters, and double plays are back. And there's no better place to play and get in on all the action, Major League Baseball action, than on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. So don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, Dave Schultz, back with more Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Let's get back to our conversation with Mike Desormeaux and how things have potentially slowed down for him in year number 2. Mike Desormeaux, Ragin Cajuns head football coach on Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. You're heading into year number 2. How is the offense different than from the team you inherited? And do you tweak it to, do you expect the players to tweak to you, or do you tweak it to who you have as players?
I think that's the fun part of putting it together as a coach is that every year you've got different players with different strengths. And I think as a coach, I think you'd be foolish not to try to use your players' strengths. This year we're in a much better spot up front on the offensive line. We've got way more competition there. We've got a lot of guys who played last year, and some of the additions we added last year are really growing up and coming along. So, at running back, those guys gained some really good experience last year. They've done a good job this spring. So hopefully we can get back to running it much more effectively than we did, especially earlier in the year last year. But some of the things that we added in the pass game last year, we threw it a little bit more often, earlier in possessions, earlier in the downs. And that stuff paid off for us. At receiver, you do have a handful of guys that are coming back that have played quite a bit, but you're going to have a lot of new faces there. So last year we felt like we're going to have to throw it a lot early until we could get the O-line going and the running backs in the run game. This year, hopefully we can be pretty balanced early on, but certainly you'd expect to be able to run the ball a little bit better while some of those young receivers get it figured out. We've got a talented group, obviously behind Pete and Jake. You got Charles Robertson and Jaden Johnson and some of these guys that really have a lot of potential. At X, Lance really showed some promise last year and played really, really well at the end of the year. And he's still learning the position. And then behind him, you got a handful of guys that are competing. So you expect, Jake and Pete and Neil Johnson and some of those guys to carry the load while, the rest of those guys, you figure out who are the guys that you can depend on under the lights. And so that's what makes it fun. Every year is you're trying to figure out how the team fits, what's going to help this team win. And for us, I don't know, differently. I think you just try to call things that your team is doing the best at the time, try to get the ball moving and build some confidence. But, that's kind of what the summer and the fall camp is for, is you figure out who are the guys that are making plays and what do you have to do offensively to win. And, I believe in being balanced. I believe in spreading the ball around the field. And for us, that's certainly what we want to be able to do. You want to be two-dimensional on offense.
Locked On Sun Belt, your team every day. We're talking with the Louisiana Ragin Cajuns, Mike Desormeaux. All right, you're in year number 2 as head coach. A little bit different because you took over basically in your hometown. And so your head wasn't quite spinning as much as other guys who have to move, find a place to live, put kids in school, bring in the head coach, bring in more coaches and stuff. So some of that was taken care of. But what is spring football in year 2 differently? How much have things, we ask, like probably your quarterback, things need to slow down. How much have things slowed down for you now heading into year 2 of, being a head coach at Louisiana?
Yeah, quite a bit. Last year, when I was named the head coach, at the end of
still not over that. You kept that from me at the Sun Belt Championship game. I'm still not over it.
Yeah, I was sworn to secrecy. So, take it up with Dr. Maggard, I guess.
I will.
Yeah, good. There was a lot of change within the program, and probably, I think in the era that we're in now, where you've got the transfer portal, that's always a possibility. There was just a lot of roster, I don't know, I guess turmoil, I guess is really what it was.
Right.
We lost, in the end, we ended up losing 12 scholarship offensive linemen from the year before. And so, you had just a lot of those holes in there. And, truthfully, and Dave, you know me well enough to know, I want to build it with high school kids, with young guys that you can get in the program and develop. And, I felt like for us in the long run, we were going to be better off going that route. And, I knew last year, certainly at different spots, we were going to have some challenges. And last year at this time, I knew what the challenges were after spring, after you get through 15 practices. But our roster is much more settled this year. We've been fortunate. We've been able to keep the entire coaching staff together and intact. So you just feel like there's a little bit more synergy. There's a little bit more, we're a little bit more in sync than we were. We've certainly got a lot of position battles that are going on. But that's a good thing. Last year we kind of had a group of starters, and then there was a huge gap between the depth as backups. And this year, I think you've got a lot of guys that are fighting for starting position and playing time and who's going to play the most. And I think we've got a really talented young team that certainly got to play last year. And now it's their turn. So for us, and for me sitting here, I feel a lot better where we're at, in year 2 coming out of spring. Feel like we're much further along than we were last year. And it's been fun. Right now I'm doing exit meetings with our players. I meet with every one of them on the team, and, just to hear their insight on where they see things and kind of where they are and where we were last year. Our team's in a really good spot, and it's year 2 is typically the year where things start to settle down a little bit. You really kind of start to get your bearings. And, even as familiar as I was with this place and with what I wanted to do, certainly, I'll be the first to admit I made plenty of mistakes in the first year that, I've had to do a lot of self-reflecting on and make sure that I do some things to help our players have more success.
Talking to Mike Desormeaux, head coach of Louisiana Ragin Cajuns, Locked On Sun Belt, your team every day. All right, the Cajuns have done a really good job over the last few years of picking out undervalued offensive linemen. You mentioned the offensive lineman. One of the transfers was Osiris Swords, a 3-star who ends up with the Cajuns. Robert Hunt, I'm not sure wasn't any star when he was recruited. That was actually a couple of coaches ago. And Kevin Dotson. And so that's at least 3 offensive linemen from the Cajuns that are going to be playing pro ball. What is it about the Ragin Cajuns being able to identify offensive linemen that others don't want to seem to take a chance on?
I think the big thing is that where we're at, we don't have to compromise ourselves by recruiting rankings. We truly get to go out and evaluate the pressure in some other places to sign these classes that have, because rankings matter. It's never been important to us here. We value our own opinions. We work really hard to be very thorough with these guys and with their coaches and with their families and making sure they're the right types of fit. And, we do consider ourselves to be a program of development. And for us, that means that sometimes you're taking guys that you see the traits in and you might not get the return on investment for 2 years, but you take these traits and they're the right kind of people and that they've got the characteristic around some really good young offensive linemen that we've taken that were not highly recruited. Max Mitchell's in the same category there.
Right.
And we took them, but you see the traits that they have and the growth that they've had throughout their high school careers. And then that they're the type of kids that are going to come in here and work to a certain standard and work with a purpose. And I've been fortunate enough to get to see that. Hunt and Dotson were here when I got here, but they were just coming off of redshirt years. And so I got to see what they were early in their careers. And, you watch these guys and you can just tell there are certain – when you recruit kids, I think you always try to look for characteristics in them that you see in players you've already had that have been successful. That's like recruiting is certainly not a science. We miss on both ends, right? Sometimes you think they're going to be really good and they're not. Sometimes you take one that you're not so sure about and they end up being great. So you try to see the kids that remind you of guys you've had that have had success. And I've been fortunate enough to get to see that. And certainly we value O-line play. We have 2 offensive line coaches, and we work really hard because that's where it starts. And that's what's made us different is not only the upper level players we've had, but certainly the depth that we've been able to play. In 21, we played 10 guys every game regularly. And most people don't do that. For us last year, we were struggling to find 7 that we felt really could go out there and play. And, I think the depth is what makes us a whole lot better, and it's made us unique in the past. So, that's what you're trying to get to where you got 8 in particular that you feel need to play every game. And certainly, hopefully you get to 10 where you feel like you've got a true 2 deep that can go out there and go win games for you.
Probably not going to give quite as much credit on the Max Mitchell find since the Cajuns had Elijah on the team, and someone saw the film and say, "Oh, how's this guy getting all these yards?" Oh, the guy was in front of him was Max Mitchell. So maybe not quite as much credit for him. Talking to Mike Desormeaux, Louisiana Ragin Cajuns, Locked On Sunbelt podcast. All right, defensively, where are you? We've been talking a lot of offense. Defensively, where are the Cajuns?
Yeah, so defensively, I think we'll start up front, obviously. I think that's where it always starts. You're losing Zion on that defensive line that without it, anyone would be sitting here. They'd be crazy to tell you that that's an easy replacement. The thing was that last year is we had a lot of the other guys playing on the D-line alongside Zion had really had no experience. And some of them were older players that had never really played here much. Now you've got a group of guys that have played quite a bit, with Jordan Lawson, Marcus Weiser, Sonny Hazard, Mason Narcisse, Nigel McGriff. You got a group of kids that have played a whole lot in our offense. And then certainly we've added a couple players, Kadarius Miller and Antoine Bayless that really have been a good fit for us this spring. So you've got depth. And I think the way you replace someone like Zion, you don't go 1 for 1, man. That guy was a really good player here for a long time. You have to do it with depth, and everyone has to elevate their play. So we feel really good about that group that we have up front. At times last year, I think they played really, really well. As the year went on, injuries start to kind of add up and some things, got some guys that kind of, some things happen where they're not available to play. And certainly you saw the wear and tear at the end of the year. So we know that we've got to be same thing. You talk about the O-line, but on D-line even more. So you got to be at least 2 deep the way that we want to play, where those guys can play full tilt. Zion played less snaps last year than he's ever played and was way more productive. So our guys see the value in, hey, having depth and having guys that can come in there and play really well. And that group is going to be good. We signed a great little freshman class that I think is going to be really good players at some point. I think it's always hard to say that an O-lineman or a D-lineman as a true freshman will really be able to play and be effective. But at some point, those guys will be good players here, and they've got to develop along the way. But we've got a good older core group that they've got a little bit of time to figure it out. At linebacker, it's kind of funny. It's 2 years in a row you lose your 2 starting inside linebackers, and it's a unique thing to be in. But I talk about it quite a bit on this show with you just now, is how many guys we've played over time. Right. In last year, Quibido and Moncrief, they played almost 50% of the snaps the year before. They stepped in and played really well. Last year, certainly KC Osai, I think, has really stepped up and had a great spring. He's an impact player, but he and Jasper, they both played quite a bit last year behind Quib and Moncrief. Kendra Gant, you add him to the mix. He's very versatile. He can play on the edge. He can play inside. Caleb Edwards is a young player that last year was a true freshman, played a lot of special team snaps and played, a handful of snaps in games for us on defense. So you got KC and Jasper coming back with Gant and Caleb right there in the mix competing for those spots. So, you got a good group right there, guys that have experience. Certainly they're both first-year starters, but, you feel good about the body of work, that they've done in the past. At outside backer, you got Cam Whitfield, who's tremendously talented, young player that played last year for us and did well in spots. And, and then you got Tyler Guidry, who, Tyler's a 6-year guy, has been here a long time. He's played on special teams. He's done a lot for us. And now it's his turn to really have a significant role in his defense and to go out there and go make an impact. And he had a great spring. It's like he's got new life in him with a new role coming up. And, that's part of it. Sometimes you got guys that are day one starters and contributors, and some guys like Tyler who are role players for a long time that now they've been in the program. They've done it the right way a long time, and he's going to have a big year for us. So, that linebacker group, a lot of experience, even though not a lot of starters back, replacing Andre Jones and, Moncrief and Quib, but a lot of guys that have played quite a bit. So, excited about those guys getting the opportunity to go out there and go play. At corner, Trey Amos has had his best spring, and I think Trey Amos is really a special player. And he's finally playing with the confidence that we've been trying to get out of him. Caleb Anderson has really stepped up and played well in spots last year, had a great spring. I think losing Eric Guerra is kind of the question that everybody says, well, who do you replace him with at field corner? And you got some guys battling out there. Amir McDaniel has been here for a long time too, and he's played in some spots. Last year played well. This spring really stepped up and competed. Similar skill set to Eric, a little bit smaller corner, really, cat quick, short area quickness. And the big thing for him is mentally, can he get his game where Eric's was? Because that was what Eric was, just really smart football player. And then you got Justin Agu and Keon Martin, who are competing for some time behind him. So, you got a lot of competition all over the place here. And, I kind of talked to the DBs about it a little bit. That's what you want it to be. When Percy Butler was here and, like in 21, you had Percy, Cam Solomon, Cam P, and Braylon Tronhon, all 4 of those guys week in and week out. You didn't know who was going to start. I remember Percy got drafted in the 4th round, and one of the scouts was like, well, why didn't he start, 4 games? And I said, well, it's because, the other guy played better than him the week before and practiced better. That's the way we did it. And it made Percy a better player. It made our secondary better, and certainly made us better as a team. So that's the competition that you want. And our kids, they understand, this guy got drafted in the 4th round and didn't start 4 games his senior year. It's not, we wasn't mad at him. He played just as much as he always did. It's just, it made the competition made us better and made him better. And, you kind of round out that defensive group with our star, Sam Overhang to the field, and we moved Cam P there. And he really fits there, really well for us. He does a great job, puts him a little bit closer to the action. He gets to be a little bit more involved in the game as a blitzer, in coverage, and playing in the apex. He's such a headsy player. When you have him out there kind of, playing some of those high lows and things in zone, he presents some challenges out there, man, because he's just a headsy, really good football player. So, defensively, we're excited. Lost a lot of good pieces there. But I do think we got better depth than we had last year. And I think that's where you got to make up for losing big time impact players, is you got to do it in numbers. And everyone's got to elevate their game a little bit.
All right, let's take one more time out. We'll wrap up our conversation with Mike Desormeaux right after this. He does give us a little bit of an update on injured wide receiver Michael Jefferson. But don't miss out on Locked On's NFL Mock Draft Special is here. It's bigger than ever. Follow along all 32 teams' first pick in a 6-episode ultimate mock draft experience. Only Locked On can deliver. All episodes are available now on Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, let's wrap up things with Mike Desormeaux. Not only does he give us an update on Michael Jefferson, but whether we know or not, when does he personally like to have a decision on his starting quarterback? All right, let's wrap things up. A couple more quick questions for Mike Desormeaux, head coach of Louisiana Ragin Cajuns, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Really tragic news a couple of weeks ago. Former Cajuns wide receiver Michael Jefferson in a car accident, a serious car accident. He has been released from the hospital reportedly. And actually, I didn't realize this maybe at the time, but he's from Mobile, Alabama, where I just spent some time. I used to run at Murphy High all the time. Do you have any update that you can share with us what his condition is?
So, I think there are a lot of things floating around out there, and his family, they don't want a whole lot out. MJ has been in good spirits. Every time we've spoken to him, he's been in really good spirits. I found out, I guess, on the Tuesday after Easter, and ended up getting on him with FaceTime that day. And, he was in really good spirits, and he's handling it really well.
Okay.
He's in a rehab facility right now, and he's starting to move around. I know he's walking, and he's on the way back. From everything that they're telling us, he's expected to make a full recovery. It's just going to take some time. But Michael is a kid that, you hate when things like this happen, because he's a good kid, and everything he's done, he's always put his team first, and he's done things the right way here. And his teammates, they've kept in constant contact, and they've called him. They keep me up to date. I don't want to bombard him and the family. I know they're talking to a lot of people. So, our kids, they just want him to get his opportunity too. But, so that's about the extent of it. The details of the wreck and things like that, I don't know, but I know he's in a good spot mentally. And, and if anybody's going to work to come back, it'll be him.
All right, so we'll wrap it up with where we started. It's one thing when I find out, or basically when you tell us who the starting quarterback is, but as a former quarterback playing college ball and now head coach, when do you like to have that decision? When do you, not necessarily when you share it with the players, but when do you want to have that decision made?
I think the sooner the better. Certainly, like I said, I was hoping we would be able to get through spring and be able to say, okay, it's Chandler or Zion, pending Ben's recovery. And then he's in the mix. But, sure. I just think that you owe it to the team and to, when you feel like you've got the options there that can really go out there and go play well and go win. And all three of those guys have really proven that on the field. So, we're going to let it go as long as it needs to go. Would love to know early on in fall camp, if it lasts that long, where you can make that decision, you can start working that direction. But, at the end of the day, our team is really confident in those guys. Our coaching staff is really confident in those guys. And, you got three kids that have really worked their tails off to be in contention. So, you got to let the thing play out where you get the best chance to go and win football games in the fall. And, we got three kids right there that it matters a whole lot to. They've got the ability that you need. They've all got the leadership qualities that you want. And, it's a good situation for us to be in. He's Mike Desormeaux, head coach of Louisiana Ragin Cajuns. If we don't see it beforehand, Coach, we'll see it at Sunbelt Media Days in New Orleans. I really appreciate your time, and we'll certainly see you during fall camp. Thanks, Coach. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate you having me.